Welcome to the FML podcast, the podcast on a mission to uncover actionable insights, explore the latest trends, and to catalyze your fintech's growth. Join Growth Gorilla's founder and managing director, Shanae and some of fintech's hardest hitting marketers and leaders.
Welcome everyone to today's episode of the FML podcast. Today it's the FML Team Talk, and where we get together once a month and deep dive into topics, trends in and around the world of fintech and fintech marketing. Obviously, I'm your host today, Shanae, and we're joined by members of our team here at Growth Gorilla. We've got Ross, our head of performance marketing, Julia, our head of influencer marketing, and Shanae, our senior CRM manager. So before we jump into our deep dive topic for today, let's start with some headlines from the fintech industry. So I think there's two sort of themes that I want to kind of go through. One is what's going on with the challenger banks at the moment. Big news from Starling, Monzo and Revolut. And then I want to touch upon a little bit around sort of AI in fintech. So I think the headlines are, in Starling, Anne Boden has stepped down as CEO. Monzo has hit profitability for the first time. And Revolut has now over 30 million retail users. So I think starting from the top, what are your thoughts on Anne Boden's decision to step down as CEO?
I really liked the quote where she said, when I started Starling in 2014, I was told no one ever starts a bank. So I think you've got to take your hat off to Starling in general, just being a trailblazer really for everyone else who's followed, to be honest. There was a point where in banking, the most technological we'd got, and this was still the 21st century we're in, the most technological we got was basically First Direct, who their edginess was basically not having high street branches, and you've got to pick up the phone to talk to them, which is, I mean,
the USP was somebody picking up the phone.
Really technologically advanced. So I think you've got to kind of tip your hat to it and say, you know, she's had a massive impact as part of Starling and everything that's happened since, really paving the way.
Yeah, and Starling's had profitability for some time now as well, right? And obviously one of the headlines, obviously Monzo having just reached profitability, you know, Starling got there a lot sooner than a lot of the others. What do you think that's been down to? You know, what would you, not necessarily just one reason for their success, but you know, I've got my views, but you know, what do you all think has been kind of been their recipe for success?
I think one of the factors is definitely their initial approach to kind of going out there and building brand awareness. So the second I think of Starling, I think of that ad they ran a few years ago where it's like a flying shed. If you remember that one, the sort of shed takes off and flies. I think they did a really good job of very quickly getting the brand out there and building that awareness, really. I think that sometimes it can be a hard slog, and I'd imagine that's where a lot of kind of the banking startups failed, and that's why she said she was told no one ever starts a bank, is because I think it's just so hard to break through, or was so hard to break through from like a trust angle. So the first thing they probably needed to do was instill that trust in people, and the easiest way for them to do that was through traditional advertising at the time, because there was back then certainly an element of, if they've got a TV ad, I'll probably trust them more. I think they were just very quick to get out there and just start doing it and invest in that. And because they did that, they kind of got almost like a first mover advantage.
I think also the way that they decided to acquire customers is in the audience that they were going after. They were first and foremost a business bank for SMEs, weren't they? And I think that was a really tactical decision that they made, because by providing SMEs with good service, you inherently have a built-in audience to sell into for your personal banking as well. Because obviously, you know, you've got one or more directors for every business. And therefore, yes, you know, you can pick up the directors themselves for your personal banking and then their partners and so on and so forth as well, which I thought was a really, really well thought out approach to acquiring users.
Do you think that was strategic or kind of happened?
I think it was on the back of the fact that Monzo was going after, in my view, lower end retail users, and the traditional banks were going after sort of the mid-level high net worth users, and the SME space has been ignored for a very long period of time. There's lots and lots of tools out there for SMEs, but banking wise, you can argue and say that, HSBC and NatWest and Lloyds all offer sort of like free banking or whatever it is, and for 18 months, whatever it is, but they're really, really cumbersome to use. I remember when we were making some changes to our company account, it was quicker for me to open up a Starling bank account, move all my banking across, than my ability to get a share certificate or the incorporation certificate over to HSBC, because they wanted the physical version and I only had the electronic version, which you can get on Company's House, and they wouldn't accept that. So I printed it off and gave it to them, and they went, "Oh, it's a printout." And I went, "Yeah, because it's electronic, that's why."
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The simplicity of it was very, very coming of age, very timely. And Starling's a little bit, I think it's like a year older than Monzo, isn't it?
I don't know. I should know, but I don't know.
Monzo popped up, I think, the year after Starling.
Well, Monzo reaching profitability for the first time. I was quite shocked when
Yeah.
we realised that it was...
It was really interesting, though, because I think in the article, there's a quote that says that they could have chosen to reach profitability a while ago, which I thought was quite a bold statement to make, like, oh, we just decided to not be profitable until now. But there is some truth to it. So they said that they kind of balance growth and profitability to kind of maximize on that, which I think is like really sensitive. And a lot of businesses kind of get that wrong. They want to be profitable quickly, or they focus so much on growth that they're spending, and they never actually reach that point, let alone get profitable. But yeah, I thought it was quite interesting that was their take on it. Like, oh, it's nothing. We could have done it sooner, but we were just being smart about it.
A lot of it was down to their lending as well, wasn't it? Because they've implemented the lending functionality. Yeah. And to kind of quote one of our previous guests, I think his name was Ian, he was CEO at Shawbrook Bank, and he made this comment on our podcast where, banking was always about bringing in deposits and paying interest at one rate and then lending out at another. And that's what banking is. It's about lending. And the fact that it's such a surprise that Monzo have reached profitability with the aid of, revenue from lending, I mean, we should hardly be surprised. I mean, that's what a bank is supposed to be doing.
Did they get in any trouble for who they were lending to? I can't remember if this was Monzo or another bank. They were like lending to people who weren't financially stable enough to secure those types of loans, and they were putting loads of people in debt.
I think that may have been Klarna. Yeah. And then, last but not least, on the challenger banks, Revolut hitting 30 million users worldwide. We talk about Starling's success, but I think if there's ever an example for a business that's, driven growth relentlessly, it's going to be Revolut, isn't it?
Yeah, they've got that banking license issue, haven't they? That's their hang-up. I mean, the numbers are absolutely staggering. 400 million transactions a month. Yeah, during the first 3 months of 2023, around 85 million peer-to-peer transactions were made between Revolut customers with zero transfer fees. So, people are out there using the app on a daily basis at a staggering rate. But I still don't think people are using the app in the way they would like it, i.e. as a bank. And I think that's partly, certainly in the UK, down to their license situation. I mean, I've got a Revolut account, but I've never had my salary paid into it. I think the three headlines we've got actually are quite a good cross-section, because if I was thinking about moving an account over to a challenger bank, as I have, these would be the three you would think about. And the one that stands out, if you're going to pick between three of them, the one that stands out is Revolut, in terms of not having the license would put me off opening an account with them. So I think it'd be a massive thing now. If they get that license, they go into that bracket on a par with Starling and Monzo, and I think it changes the game for them, basically. I think that's kind of holding them back.
From a business perspective, I would struggle to get board sign-off to move Growth Gorilla's business banking over to Revolut, given the fact that they don't have FSCS, they don't have a banking license, and then they don't have FSCS protections, right? So effectively what I'm saying is that I'm quite happy to have, zero protection on company deposits. And it'd be interesting that if they do get that banking license, will they see, an increase in customer value and an influx of people who are standing on the periphery saying, yeah, we would like to use Revolut. This is the one thing holding us back, right?
It wouldn't take much for them now. That's why I think it's probably the game changer to go out to the 30 million, or certainly the segment that's within the UK of that 30 million, and say to all of those users, we've now got FSCS protection. We're now considered a bank officially. Give them an incentive to move all of their direct debits and their salary and everything over to their Revolut account, having now got that sort of trust element. Give them an incentive to do that. Maybe implement like a member get member. I mean, it's a CRM dream, really, isn't it, Shanae, from your perspective?
Yeah. I was just going to say, thinking about it from a consumer perspective, though, and I don't know if this is just me or if anyone else feels like this, but certain brands like Revolut, for example, because they haven't got that banking license, they'll always kind of be in that box to me in my mind. Like, no matter how they kind of change and evolve, it's kind of like almost tainted because they've been in that position. Not necessarily that it's a bad thing. Like I've not read any sort of like negative headlines about Revolut off the back of it, but changing people's minds about a brand after such a time is quite difficult.
Do you think time is the factor there, though? Sort of over time?
Yeah.
I mean, I've had a Revolut account for ages and nothing bad has ever happened to that account to put me off.
Of course.
It's literally the FSCS. I mean, if they got that, they got the license, maybe that's the tipping point.
Yeah, and so I think there's like time in terms of between launch and getting that license. So like you said, you've had your Revolut account for ages. It would have been obviously nicer if they had done that sooner. And then there's also the difference between existing customers and acquiring new ones. So I think for existing customers, like you said, nothing bad's ever happened with your account. That would be the tipping point for you. You'd be completely happy. For other people who have known about the brand and have been deterred because of it, I don't know how willing they're going to be to get on board, even once they do have the licensing.
If that is the case, it's almost not a level playing field, right?
Is it not about how people feel towards digital banks as well, though?
Yeah.
More so than anything. Because, for example, I've never had any issues with my Monzo account, which is the one I use when it comes to digital.
Yeah.
They've got all the things in place, but do I want to move my entire bank into that? No.
Yeah, not even necessarily. I think that's probably another. Well, people who have digital banks and people who don't have any whatsoever.
The chance of me moving my personal banking from HSBC to any digital bank is
slim.
Non-existent. Yeah, non-existent. Right, like it's such a huge amount of our sake, and then there's also then little things in there that HSBC offer things like, you know, the ISAs and investments and stuff like that, you know, the Starlings and the Monzos don't. And again, this goes down to the fact of, you know, I know they've got a banking license and they call themselves a bank, but are they a digital wallet, ultimately speaking?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, one can argue they are more of a bank, but there's just complexities there. And I think that also then speaks to the type of audience as well. There's a reason why Barclays and NatWest and HSBC all offer student banking and student, you know, like overdrafts and stuff like that. And they offer young people's accounts tied to their parents because they know if they start that relationship as early on as possible, they're acquiring, you know, their customers for life at that point. And I think there was like a study done, and I can't, you know, don't quote me on this, but I'm sure there was a study done where the banking brand that you will go with, you know, the likelihood is it will be the same brand that your parents bank with as well. So it's quite an uphill struggle, right?
From a different country and you have no choice.
Yeah, that product offering as well has a massive... I mean, we had a mortgage. When we first bought a house, we had a mortgage with Halifax. Because we got the mortgage with Halifax, we got bank accounts with Halifax because then you could see everything within one page on the app. So now in a position where if I moved banks, because everything's integrated, I'd have to move my account, my wife's account, the joint account.
Oh, gosh.
All of, obviously, the direct debits associated with them. And then also then your mortgage is sat separate to all of your bank accounts, so you can't see it in the same app. It just becomes a bit of too much of an upheaval, I think.
I would say, I don't know if I want to look at my mortgage.
Yeah, that's the exact same thing.
I like to see it going down. That's the thing.
I should give Sprive here a little plug, right? Because they've got that solution around, they've got that roundup functionality that connects into your mortgage, start paying off your mortgage early. And I've been threatening to open up an account, and I haven't, just because I'm lazy, but I thought it was a pretty good idea, to be honest. So moving on from the news with the challenger banks, last time we spoke, the headlines were all around sort of ChatGPT and AI. Since then, there's been obviously lots of news, lots of companies popping up, etc. I just want to take a few moments and kind of talk about sort of, developments and thoughts around sort of AI marketing and, what we think the benefits and limitations and issues could be. What we're kind of seeing now is actual use cases. We're now seeing people embedding ChatGPT into their products and AI/ChatGPT. So the two that we've surfaced really is Clio. That's got a new AI functionality called Haggle It. And then Moneyline has launched a ChatGPT feature as well. Aside from those two, have any of you seen sort of anything notable from an AI perspective with fintechs or even fintech adjacent that you think sort of notable or worthwhile to discuss as well?
I think my eye personally has been more on marketing, if I'm honest, rather than the use cases in products, keeping in touch with everything that's happening there, which is sort of interesting in itself. I don't want to sort of take the spotlight away from the original topic. From my perspective, I think it's just good to get the balance between what seems to be a bit of a tornado of kind of bad news around AI, where everyone thinks it's going to come in and take everyone's jobs and it's going to surpass. I think some of the fear maybe is around a leveling up as well. On a very basic level, will we get to a point where it no longer actually pays to be intelligent because we're not necessarily doing the thinking, and it completely levels the playing field, and all of a sudden the only incentive in life is to be very good at getting AI to do stuff for you. So I think all of that doom and gloom
but surely
is kind of nicely balanced by these real world kind of applications of it where, it's already genuinely making people's lives a lot easier. Everything from kind of advising them on where to put money to alerting them when, they're going to run out of money on a particular day. All of that stuff is all kind of positive stuff and positive influences AI is already having. And it just balances nicely all of the negativity, I think. That's kind of my feel for it.
Yeah, I think the initial reaction was everybody's going to be out of a job, right? I was at a talk and one of the speakers whose name I've forgotten kind of made this point around, ultimately you can think of it as sort of like garbage in, garbage out, right? You'll only get out of AI, what you put into it. So, that point around like getting really good at AI requires a degree, that obviously is going to require a skill set within itself, right? The people are going to get the most out of AI and, let's talk about a marketing perspective. Let's say you're doing some sort of desk research and you want to, you want to target a particular set of users and you ask, ChatGPT or whatever to give you the locations of particular landmarks in a particular area, overlay with population and ethnicity and all of this sort of stuff, right? But one still needs to have the concept in their mind before they can feel it. You can't go into AI and go, hey, give me a campaign on how to promote X product. It needs to be, we've got this idea, go away and give me that information. And then also then there's that element of actually reviewing the data and having the cognizance of knowing whether or not that data is accurate, relevant, or if there's an issue with it as well, right? So I kind of liken it to, particularly ChatGPT and similar products. I think the biggest job that they'll replace is probably for interns or,
just manual
entry-level positions, but I don't think it's going to eradicate, if we look at people sitting around this virtual table here, I don't think it's going to render any of us out of a job at all whatsoever. We've already seen it with one client that wanted to explore AI, and it was like, well, we still need to keep an eye on it, and we still need to produce all of the ad copy for it. We need something to make sure it's doing a good job and it's not just going rogue.
You can't just like turn it on a Monday and turn it off on a Friday afternoon. Like,
yeah, you're not going to have AI go and find you perfect fit influencers and creators for your brand and have that discussion and ideate.
I tested a platform; it does not work.
And I think actually, Shanae, from a CRM perspective, I actually think it's going to make your job. I think the CRM roles. I think that's going to become a real big area of focus because if you think about like the machine learning and investment that TikTok and Meta have done on their ad platforms, imagine in-house data. Imagine that you can do with in-house data what Meta's doing with their user data, as in, carving out really unique customer journeys that are really personalized to individuals. But that is going to need a degree of, again, cognizance, strategic thinking, content production, and oversight to make sure it's actually being delivered effectively.
Yeah.
So
it will definitely increase the so-called manpower of CRM, because it will increase, like you said, like those kind of unique customer journeys. You can get so granular and you can get so intricate with customer journeys, but obviously depending on like the size of your team, you have to kind of go for the priorities, go for the big fish, and the small little things and differences between customer A and customer B. You kind of have to go, okay, we can't focus on that right now because we just don't have the capacity. Whereas using AI can help map out what it can look like. And I can see it being so much bigger.
I mean, yeah, there's huge amounts of use cases, and I think there's other considerations as well, that there's privacy and data protection, and many of the large organizations have already put, the kibosh on ChatGPT and feeding it data, because obviously once you put the data in, it becomes held within ChatGPT and therefore data that it can leverage as well, right? So, I think there's a way to go, and I see the use cases.
Is it like there's a premium version of it, right, where if it's used in a corporate setting, there's some sort of agreement that the data can't be used outside of that company's use case? I'm pretty sure that I think that's something they spotted immediately. That was a potential hurdle. So I think they have already started, if not already put in place, something where you can, as part of buying access to ChatGPT, you can enter some sort of agreement where any information your business puts into it is solely for the purpose of your business, and you can't use that in the public access version of the software. If that makes sense, I think, anyway.
I'm not sure. I'd have to double check. So the last few months have been very, very interesting, actually. We've had lots and lots of conversations with lots and lots of well-known brands, and the conversations have been very, very much focused around social channels. And it seems that in one way, shape or form, the briefs that we seem to be receiving are around how can we support their influencer marketing, their paid social activity, and then also their organic socials at the same time. And I suppose the question on the back of that is, and what I'd like to kind of go in today, has influencer marketing and I suppose traditional social, paid and organic, are they separate channels, or have they finally converged? Are they fully conflated now? Can you have one without the other? Julia, what's your thoughts?
I think there's a gray area there. Let's start with influencer, because I think that might be the main one here. I don't think you can have influencer without having organic set up properly. I don't think you have to have organic around all channels to have influencers around all channels, but you have to have your main organic channel where people can go to beyond your website, your app, your whatever your product is centered, so that when people interact with that influencer, they can migrate to something that as native. I think companies get that wrong sometimes, that they want influencers to direct them straight to a website or to an app, and it's not always that it's going to land that way, because people don't always get into the call to action. They go and they source research who the company is first. And if you're on a social media channel, chances are you're going to research around that channel, as opposed to going to Google and finding a website. And equally, if the message that you're putting out there through an influencer is not the same message that you're putting on your organic channels, and then it becomes confusing. So I guess that you can't really have one without the other. Now, when it comes to paid, I think it's a bit more, I'm not sure. What do you think, Ross? Because I think you should have the three, but
because we have worked with startups in the past, one of the questions we get asked a lot is, does it matter if there's no content on our social media profiles, organic content? And the answer we generally give is no. And the reason is, and it's very scientific and numbers based, very few people actually click through and look at your profile from a paid ad. They may go on and do research and then find the profile organically as part of that research, as part of the wider journey. But in terms of the ad interaction, few people will actually click on the advertiser's name at the top, as opposed to actually interacting with the ad itself. or clicking through on the ad and go to the website or the app store or wherever it might be. So we generally say you can run paid without necessarily having your content off the ground on day one. It's getting, however, to the point where it's becoming difficult to do paid without having UGC, in all honesty. So I think paid needs influencer, and that's increasingly the case.
And influencer needs organic. So technically,
I guess so.
Right.
So technically, you're right. I think we're definitely heading towards a point where you might need all three, yes, but maybe for slightly different reasons than what people thought, which was, if I have no content, does that mean that it almost takes away from the brand? Which I don't think it does. I think it's just more a case of, paid needs influencer and increasingly so, and influencer needs organic.
There's a difference there as well. I think if you're a very well-known brand, you might be able to get away with it because then it's not about people understanding you as a brand. Yeah. But certainly if you're unknown to the audience you're targeting, then I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to expect them to convert just through one channel.
Yeah.
And if you can strategize the three, then great. If you can only focus on one, I think organic, but can't get away without organic.
There's definitely a massive cumulative advantage to having all three. The impact they can have on each other they amplify each other.
Well, because then you can tell a full story. I think it's really hard to tell a full story just through paid, equally as hard to tell it just through an influencer, because then it's coming across as the perspective of that creator. But then again, just organic may not reach enough people. So you need the three to be able to sell the entire story.
I think they've all got their own use cases as well, in terms of paid is very good on day one at literally driving conversions for you, getting the name out there, doing a bit of brand awareness and driving the conversion volume. If you have any kind of trust factor, or you need to do it in a more organic, cost-effective way, that's where influencer comes in, I think. But then your organic piece is more around, like you say, it's that kind of long-term engagement, much better economically in terms of your ad spend to push, let's say, long-form content out on organic and sort of relationship building and all that sort of thing. So I think they've all got kind of key roles to play as well, really.
Yeah.
I think the other dimension is, I think we're kind of looking at it quite horizontally. It's kind of like organic, paid, influencer. But then I think we can also kind of look at it quite vertically. There's a lot of social platforms out there. I think there's 4 or 5 main key ones that we look at. But I think there's also merit in discussing, is it worthwhile that if you've got a specific target audience that that exists on a particular channel, maybe 1 or 2 channels, actually investing in all 3 areas just across that, that one vertical to get that.
I don't think you need to be on all channels. I think you should target all 3 areas within the channels that you focus on, but you don't have to be in every single channel. Equally, you can do paid in multiple channels and then have your organic channels where you also do influencer activity. Usually the main ones, either Instagram or TikTok, hopefully both. YouTube, depending on the audience that you have. Twitter, I'm not the biggest advocate for Twitter, but for some brands, it works really well.
And then I think the other dimension as well is the size of the organization as well, right?
Yeah.
Because I think, obviously one of the mistakes that we'll see is smaller brands just try and do everything all at once, and that naturally causes problems. But I think, conversely, we also see very large brands not doing enough. And Julie and I recently have had obviously several conversations with prospective clients where actually it was quite surprising that when we'd done a bit of a deep dive into their activity, you would think for such seasoned brands, they would have a lot more going on. It'd be a little bit more organized.
Yeah, I think the other element as well in terms of size is the skill sets, because I think all 3 of them actually have different skill sets as well. I don't want to tell Julia what a job is, but from the outside looking in, I see paid social still as being fairly heavily data-led, even though that data and that performance is highly impacted and increasingly so by the creative you've got. I still think the actual management of the account and knowing where to put the ads and doing all of that analysis is still very heavily numbers based. Whereas on the influencer side, it's a little bit more a combination of sort of your kind of old school affiliate skill set of building relationships and managing relationships combined with a creative element that not everyone on paid social has. So I think it's completely different skill sets as well. If you agree with that, Julia.
No, I was going to say I do. Well, obviously we look at numbers within influencer marketing, engagement rates, the overall reach, following, yada, yada, yada. But I think, and this is where people get it wrong, I think you're right there, because paid is a lot more about conversions. It's what it gets you straight out of the door. Obviously, there's the bit of awareness there, but mostly about conversions. Now with influencer marketing, obviously it leads to conversion. And then I think there's that aspect that you said, it's a bit old school about keeping those relationships and dealing with the community and to make sure that it gets that way. But first and foremost, it's one, obviously awareness, two, community building, because a lot of brands don't have communities. And a great way to do that is through target communities that are already existing through creators. And then three, trust, because a lot of these brands are also not trusted because either they're new, they're not well known, or they're well known, but they're not trusted for something that they're trying to get known for. And so you use those creators to give you that backup. Later on, you convert that audience. So it's a lot about the groundwork, making sure that happens, the briefs, the storytelling, the influencers and how they're going to represent that brand, making sure that those relationships are genuine. And yeah, it's not just sitting there and allocating the right numbers and the right creative and seeing what works and what doesn't.
But personally, I think that balance of data-led versus creative, I think that's really starting to balance out now. I think it's still as data heavy. I just think now, rather than it sort of doing that and sort of balancing out, I think if anything, it's still as data-led, but is, an equal amount of emphasis on creative now.
Okay.
And
I think it's what influences the data is what has changed.
Yeah.
We've moved away from how you interact with the platform as being the major element. So how you segment your audiences, how you target your audiences, how you implement the campaigns, how you structure the campaigns in the platforms, how you build your demand gen funnel. All of that's still relevant, but it's shifted slightly towards the creative element to the point where if you've got a very, very good ad, you could put that ad in front of the entire population of the country. And within 2 weeks, for example, a platform like Meta will work out who's interacting with the ad, who's converting from the ad, and you wouldn't have to do any manual targeting at all. So the paradigm is definitely shifting in favor of creative in terms of what impacts the data at the bottom. Then the skill on the paid side is to interpret that data and then work out kind of where you go from there. Really.
I've seen a quite interesting trend at the moment from an outsider perspective, because obviously I don't do either of you two's jobs. Influencer and paid ads are starting to kind of merge together a little bit. So I feel like paid ads used to be this kind of like private thing that kind of you would see on your device, and loads of other people are getting it, right? But you either interact with it or you don't, you kind of go past it, you don't really like discuss it with your mates and stuff. But influencers are starting to talk about them from the receiving end. So rather than influencers kind of going like, hey, let me just tell you about this amazing product, they're talking about the ad. So they're going, have you seen this ad? I know everyone's talking about this ad. Everyone's seen this ad. Hi Smile is a really good example of that. And some of them, they're even starting out sounding like they're bashing the product. So they're like, oh, these ads are so annoying. It's always popping up on my screen and stuff. But then as you continue watching it, they start to kind of spin it and go, well, actually, it's actually quite a good product or whatever. That kind of shift is quite nice, I think. It's like influencers are becoming more human. They're kind of like coming more on the side of the consumer to say like, I'm with you.
Well, that's how it started. It's going full circle, and the whole like de-influencing thing, which we discussed in previous episodes, but it's not really de-influencing, it's just that the name that's been given to it. I think I've seen something that I think started with TikTok, because TikTok's quite clever at doing ads that don't look like ads, even though it's very clearly an ad. But I see something similar. I've seen the Smile one, and I've also seen, there's this creator that I love, and he keeps talking about every time, and I'm almost thinking that like, are they paying you to bash on it because you talk about it so much?
Yeah.
I forget what the brand is, but it's essentially one of those like vitamin juices or something. Like it looks like absolute grass within liquid form. And he goes like, why are all these ads popping up? Like, just eat some greens. I was like, but he's constantly talking about it. And then I start seeing the ads. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
there they are. Interesting. And
yeah, they bash them, talk about that. They even say like, oh, I thought it was fake, which I think is like what a lot of people are questioning in private anyways. So it's like bringing those sorts of things to light from the influencer. So kind of, yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting turn.
Going back to the AI point of view as well, there's loads of AI influencers popping up. So this is an actual profile. That's not really a real person. It's a bot that is an influencer, and there's millions of people following some of these. There's like beauty influencers who aren't actually people, they're bots. And they're getting really popular.
it all
People are
started
aware.
with Michaela.
People are aware they're bots, right? And they're you can like send them DMs and stuff, and they'll like reply to you. So it's, yeah, really strange. That's going to change the influencer game a lot, right? On
I
your
think
side.
we had this conversation, perhaps internally, with one of our clients, where there was worth to have like one of those bots be the influencer for the brand, the face of the brand. Yeah. And this has happened many moons ago in Brazil already. We have a company that's kind of like an Argos, and they have one of those, and we call it Malu. And when I think of Magazine Luiza, which is the brand, I think of Magalu, which is the bot. And she's on adverts. She replies to people on social media. She's on the website. She meets other It's a thing. Yeah. I do think we're going to see more of those. Do I think that they replace legitimate people as influencers? Absolutely not. But they give a face of the brand, and it's a way to make it a bit more human, even though it's absolutely not.
I mean, they become an avatar for the brand or a character for the brand. I mean, it's no different, in my view, from the Go and Compare Opera guy, right? Or the dude with the glasses in the Halifax ads. I don't think it's any different from that. It's just another version of it. So I think, sort of putting the question out to all three of you, and we could kind of like hear your views. Where do you think, I suppose, let's call it, let's broad brush on it. Where do you think social media advertising is heading? Where do you think we'll be in 12 months' time?
I personally think statics are fading. It's been happening for a while. It's not necessarily a new thing, but static image ads are, and we've seen this in the numbers, they become incrementally less effective unless you have video support, basically. And that video can be UGC, and UGC is very effective, but just video in general, to be honest. I mean, my kids, for example, they don't even watch YouTube videos anymore. They watch like YouTube shorts. Everything's consumed in the space of 15 seconds, and attention span are ever declining. But everyone's consuming all of that information via video, really. I don't think my kids in let's say, 10 years' time as adults are going to respond very well to a static banner. So I think statics are fading out, and I could see easily within 12 months, the balance of how many statics we produce to video is going to change markedly, I think.
What do you reckon, Shanae? What's your hypothesis?
You've just reminded me, actually, that I saw this. So there's this TV, Pluto TV, and the idea is that you get the TV for free, but on the condition that it comes with an ad bar underneath it. And I think that, obviously that's not social, but I think social will start to take from that, and that will start to have see more of that kind of split screen of kind of what you want to see versus what we want to kind of show you whilst you're watching what you want to see. And then I think there'll probably be a combination of that, and also a combination of, at the moment, like Julia said, everyone knows when they're watching an ad. I hope that brands will get a little more subtle with it, or it will get to a point where it's not so intrusive and it just kind of flows naturally, because I still find it quite easy to skip an ad because I can spot it in 0.3 seconds, right, when I'm scrolling. And if I don't want to see it, I won't see it. But I'm hoping in the next 12 months, it will become a little bit more subtle and a little bit more in line with everything else that's on people's timelines and feeds.
The antidote to that, right, is solving a problem within the ad. So making the content of the ad useful to people instead of going, hey, we're whoever, McDonald's,
Yeah.
get to the point of their problem very quickly and make the ads interesting and informative rather than just this is our brand, remember it for next time you need X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
To prevent it all becoming wallpaper, basically.
Yeah.
Julia, what do you reckon?
I have mixed opinions. I don't fully agree that static is going to or is dying, especially because if you notice social trends, for example, TikTok, that's a platform that started as a video format platform. It's now a lot of people are posting carousels onto TikTok that are completely static, but telling a story through those carousels. Like my day as a photo dump or kind of thing. Like whether that works for ads is a different story.
Yeah, I quite like this.
I suppose dying is probably the wrong word, isn't it? Maybe
shifting.
Yeah, the percentage of statics we produce.
I think was shifting, dying, however you want to put it there. That's where I agree with Shanae. I think it's moving from in your face to what it was meant to be all along, because that's why it's called social media, for God's sake. It needs the social aspect. And I think that that's where companies get it so wrong. Obviously, with paid ads, there needs to be an element of, I guess, usefulness. But within your organic socials and influencer campaigns, the main point is the social element. Sell a story, don't sell just a product or service. And I think that the quicker brands realize that, the better, whether that's however you want to tell that story, tell a story.
Well, from my view, for what it's worth, is probably a bit of everything that you guys have said, really. I think that we're going to see a higher reliance on video creative, whether that's animated or UGC. I definitely think it's going to be more about selling stories and creating narratives. And I think it's, ads are going to become more and more, focused on the end user as opposed to proactively pushing your brand or your product, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think TikTok is probably the closest thing that we've had to a bit of a shake-up in sort of social media in a while. And I don't see that, that there'll be a decline in TikTok. And we're even seeing Twitter take note of some bits and pieces, from TikTok, YouTube as well. And I think, there's going to be a huge reliance on creative, whatever that is, and that creative needs to be engaging.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, gents, thank you very much for jumping on the podcast today. As always, a pleasure speaking to each and every one of you. And that wraps up today's episode of the FML podcast, Team Talks. Before we go, don't forget to head to www.fmlpodcast.com for our podcast updates. Or if you want to speak to any of us or any of our experts, feel free to get in touch.
The FML podcast is brought to you by Growth Gorilla. To find out how our marketing growth experts can boost your fintech's growth, head to growthgorilla.co.uk. And make sure to search for the FML podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. On behalf of the team here at Growth Gorilla, thanks for listening.